Okay. Streaming is up. Is it? Let's see.
I don't know,
Mhm.
Gary. It looks like we need to up our game. Look at that outfit that pastor's dealing with.
Yeah, that's like maybe they should get a
I
tie.
I I was in the meeting and all these things all day, so that's why I didn't have a ch time to change. That's
No,
the
I'm not
problem.
talking about your clothes.
Oh,
You got the headphones and the
ah,
mic stand and yeah.
well, it's up to you.
I got a quick question for you. If any of my movements are they like in slow motion? You see them in slow motion?
They're blurred.
They're blurred. Yeah, I don't know why mine are blurred. It looks like I'm moving in slow motion. You know,
Oh, well,
there's
I can hear.
probably there's probably some setting on here that I could fix that with if I knew what it was.
Well, I can hear you clearly. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's that's what it
yeah. You're
matters.
better off if you don't see me and just hear
No, we need to see you, Gary. Here we go. So, uh, hey Maggie.
me.
Um, so streaming is up. Just want to welcome everyone. We're gonna be going into Micah's idolatry story in Book of Judges, chapter 17. So if you are joining with us tonight, if you have Bible or app, whatever that is, you can open and go to Book of Judges. But I'm gonna share the screen of the verses when we read it through. But let's open with prayer, shall we? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your grace and love, and we're here once again, and we'll be reading uh, chapter from the Book of Judges, one or two today. The story of Micah and all these dramas that was happening around him. Be with us, Lord, and help us to have some insight and help us to learn from you. So be with us and fill us with your spirit and help us to listen very carefully of what you want us to hear. So be with us, Lord. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So we have Book of Judges, chapter 17. We have 13 verses here. So why don't we do this? Since we have Gary and I, we've been reading a lot. So now it's been a while for Mark and Maggie join in here. So why don't you, both of you, share this chapter and read it through? It's relatively short chapter. So Mark, you can read um maybe six, maybe chap six verses, and the rest will be Maggie. Is that okay?
Sure.
Sounds good. So I'm going to share the screen here. This is Book of Judges, chapter 17. And I'm sharing with New King James, but whatever version you have, you can
I
read.
thought we were 18.
Oh, 17.
All right, let me
Yep.
back up. Okay, I'm on 17.
Sounds good.
Now there was a man from the mountains of Ephraim whose name was Micah. And he said to his mother, The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ears, Here is the silver with me, I took it. And his mother said, May you be blessed by the Lord, my son. So when he had returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son, to make a carved image and a molded image. Now therefore I will return it to you. Thus he returned the silver to his mother. Then his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the silversmith. And he made it into a carved image and a molded image, and they were in the house of Micah. The man Micah had a shrine and made an ephod and household idols, and he consecrated one of his sons, who became his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite and was staying there. The man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he could find a place. Then he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" So he said to him, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm on my way to find a place to stay." Micah said to him, "Dwell with me, and be a father and a priest to me, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver per year, and a suit of clothes and your sustenance." So the Levite went in. Then the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite as a priest." That is the end.
Okay. So quite interesting few details popped up from this chapter. Do you hear piano music? No? Okay. Because my son is playing piano really loudly, so I thought that you may be hearing it too.
Nope.
Okay. Well, it's good. So, what do you think in chapter 17? This story, this guy named by Micah, he took his mother's silver, 1,100 shekels of silver, and he returned that to his mom, right?
Hmm?
Only after he knew there was a curse.
Right? And mother's response was interesting. May you be blessed by the Lord, my son. Well, that's good that he returned his mom's server. And then her action afterwards is interesting. What do you remember? Starting from verse 3. What did she do with the silver?
Gave it back to him.
Or is it that direct that the money be used to make an image to be worshipped?
Yeah, carved image or molded image. And so he basically made and gave it to his mom. No. His mom took the silver and gave it to the silversmith. And the silversmith made it carved image and molded image.
But only a portion of the money, it looks like.
So 1,100. Yeah, that's right.
Because she just took 200 shekels of silver for the silversmith.
Yeah. In verse 5, what did he have? Shrine and an ephod. To me, the most interesting thing about this chapter is Micah is doing whatever he wants to do.
And the mother is condoning.
You're right. And verse 6 is a kind of summary of what's been happening here. Do you see verse 6? In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
So I'm interested here in, I know we're saying that he did whatever he wanted to do and such, but he's also he's also trying to do what seems somewhat right, isn't he? He's making an ephod, which would have come from his heritage as an understanding of a way to communicate with the Lord. And he hires him this passerby, and he believes that God will certainly be helpful to him because he now has someone, a Levite, as his priest. I mean, it may be hugely misguided what he's doing, but it does seem as though he's at least attempting to have some sort of proper setup for worship, even if it's completely wrong.
Well, he has a knowledge of what it's supposed to be looking like. Then he had that Levite, were here. And if we read the chapters of how the land was distributed, I would say, like I said, he had some idea of how it should be looking like, and having God, or he wanted to make his house as a place of worship. The the problem was ephod was made and given uh to the priest to discern, right? Like what is right, what is wrong. Um, it is not his job. He's from Ephraim. Micah is what? Man
Yeah.
from mountains of Ephraim. Um, is not at all Levite. And who could consecrate priest? That's another question. Like, can he do that?
Does he
Uh,
have access to the information that would tell him these things?
I think he knew what it's supposed to be looking like, and he's setting things up as it's supposed to be. But
But he may have known from many verbal accounts and some history and some
mm,
things like that. Are we making the assumption that he's also got the word of God before him that he can read through?
well, with the progression of the chapters in the book of Judges, and Gary, help me if I'm missing anything here. Um, the spiritual condition of Israelites are it's not progressing per
No,
se, it's going down.
right?
With that story of Micah, and I don't want to spoil the next chapter, but I mean he's one of those examples. I think it was given here in this chapter where um people are people know the information, like you said. Maybe they maybe had some books or scroll that they were able to read, so they preserve how the worship looked like, or how they could have some kind of worship setting from the time with having a priest and all those things. But from my standpoint, and I don't know if I'm getting your question right, Mark, but he knew what it is, but it's not supposed to be that way. Let's just put it that way. And he's doing it anyways.
Yeah. He
And
was
even go ahead, Gary.
he was basically trying to make his own little tabernacle set up so he didn't have to be under the rest of Israelite leadership type thing. And since he was now the king of his own little thing, he thought that he had the right to consecrate even one his son, because he consecrated one of his sons as a priest first, and then a better offer came by when a Levite happened to come and knock on his door. So yeah, he didn't have the power, but he knew he was what it was like in the tabernacle, and he was trying to make his own place, his own little tabernacle, so he didn't have to to journey down and be underneath somebody else's watchful eye, I guess. I don't.
So like it is more of the form of godliness is there. And just borrowing Paul's language here. But spiritually speaking, it was not like his devoting his life or his family to God. It's more of like, I want to have something for my preference. Um, so I don't know how spiritual it was, but they were just, he wanted to have some kind of form
Yeah.
of holiness or godliness in his house. I don't remember where, but there's a chapter that talks about the distribution of the different sections of the land that they took. The
Right.
Levites were assigned to different areas. Like each clan, you guys go there. 'Cause they were not given the portion territory, but they were like with the
They were
refugees,
given cities.
yeah, cities, and then you are assigned to that city. That's the way it's supposed to be. And now this man who supposed to be in Bethlehem, now he is roaming around and he found this place and Micah hired him. Um, I'm nothing wrong with hiring. I mean, because the Levites were compensated for what they were doing, but this is not like God setting. It is like you be my priest
Mhm.
or my priest to God. What I mean, however you want to read. He knew like it is important to have a priest in the worship or shrine, but it is not like how God instructed the Israelites. So I think that's the interesting part of the story where this one man was doing when he had the was it 11,000 shekels of
1100.
700.
1,100 shekels of silver, and then like came up with the image, and then he's just starting his own tabernacle right here.
Well, it's kind of the way he was raised because that was his mother's intentions,
Hmm.
and he wasn't even okay with that. He was going to
Oh yeah.
steal the money from his mother, and we don't know what for sure he was going to do with it. Once he found out she put a curse on it, I read a couple of commentaries on it that said curses were a very big deal and people were very superstitious about them.
Hmm.
So once he knew there was a curse on the money, he wanted to give it back to have the curse removed. Well, apparently you couldn't just remove a curse. So his mother tried to supersede the curse by asking the Lord to bless it.
Mm.
And all of these things were outside of the scope of what God had intended. So, I mean, there was already three wrongs there before the Levite, who wasn't really supposed to be out, shopping his wares from town to town either. But
Hmm.
it said, the ones I read that Israel had kind of quit giving to the Levites. So the Levites were getting down to where they had more people than they had money and jobs for them. So, this guy just headed out on his own and came across the ideal situation. Somebody would pay him to be a priest, which he really wasn't qualified to do back in his home. I don't think he wasn't high enough up the ladder and had enough seniority to do much more than menial tasks. So he accepted pay rather than a gift to be divided. So that was wrong. And as soon as he seen the images, he should have seen that that was wrong. So far out of this whole story, I don't see anything that was right in the eyes of God.
So like to me, it is like very human driven form of worship here, which is, I mean,
Mhm.
they have the form, they have the priest, they have ephod, they have Levites, all these things were used to be the format, but it is not really God-centered. It's more of like Micah wanted to hire a private priest who
He
will
wanted
bring.
it, he wanted it for show, to look like he was really out there, but he didn't have God in his heart to begin with. So it was kind of all wrong kind of from the beginning. The other thing that I didn't realize when I read this, that
Mhm.
from the commentaries, that this took place shortly after Gideon. So this didn't follow after Samson. This chapter was this whole story took place before the rest of the stories that we've already covered in Judges. So it said that this was shortly after the time of Gideon, and that's how quick the people had fallen away. And so that kind of surprised me too. It doesn't follow in order anyway what was going on. So it's another example to show without some kind of structure, the people they wandered away right away as soon as they were off by themselves, and they lost track of where they should be uh, spiritually anyway.
So whenever we had this story come out with, when I sit down with my pastor friends, or when I was in college, we read this story like, oh, we shouldn't be we're not called to be hired as a personal private pastor for somebody. We always have to follow the calling from God, or like we used to read that way and apply to the pastoral calling perspective, this story, what not to do. Um, but anyways, any other thought? Maggie and Mark, you were wanted to add more? Because we have
Nope.
more.
I just
Go
have to see how it unfolds. I didn't
Okay.
read ahead like Gary there.
All right. So are we okay with 18? I mean 17, that we can move on to 18? But I mean the 17 is basically setting up the kind of backdrop. Like this is the setting here.
What I think is that the relationship between Micah and this Levite, it just seemed to fit them. Like everybody was for their own. I mean, it was not, Micah was trying to actually hide, like he was not doing what was right in the eyes of God.
Mm.
And the Levite just came in because he was just for hire, and it just seemed to work right. But that didn't mean that that was right, because they were not doing it through, God-centered, way that God needed. At least that's how I got that.
You're right. Everyone was on their own. They were looking
Mm-hmm.
at their own agenda, whether they are
Mm-hmm.
Levites or Ephraimites or whoever that is.
Yeah.
So let's see how it goes with this guy who have his private priest, private worship, private ephod, and all those things, and what happens after in chapter 18. So we have
31.
31, 8 verses. Let's read 8 verses each, shall we?
Yep.
Let me share the screen once again. Hey, starting from Gary and Mark, Margaret, and myself. Let's go that way.
Okay. In those days there was no king of Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. For until that day their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from their territory, men of valor from Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. they said to them, "Go search the land." So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. While they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place, and what do you have here?" He said to them, "Thus and so," and Micah did for him. "He has hired me, and I have become his priest." So they said to him, "Please inquire of God, that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The presence of the Lord be with you on your way." So the 5 men departed and went to Laish. They saw the people who were there, how they dwelt safely in a manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. There were no rulers in the land who might put them to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. Then the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said to them, "What is your report?"
So they said, "Arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Would you do nothing? Do not hesitate to go and enter to possess the land. When you go, you will come to a secure people and a large land, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is on the earth." And 600 men of the family of the Danites went from there, from Zorah and Eshtaol, armed with weapons of war. Then they went up and encamped in Kirjath Jearim in Judah. Therefore they call the place Mahana Dan to this day. There it is west of Kirjath. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone out to spy the country of Laish answered and said to their brethren, "Do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, household idols, a carved image, and a molded image? Now therefore consider what you should do." So they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite man, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. The 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate.
Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land went up. Entering there, they took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. The priest stood at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men who were armed with weapons of war. When these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be quiet. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us. Be a father and a priest to us. Is it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel?" So the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image, and took his place among the people. Then they turned and departed, and put the little ones, the livestock, and the woods in front of them. When they were a good way from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. And they called out to the children of Dan. So they turned around and said to Micah, "What ails you that you have gathered such a company?" So he said, "You have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priests, and you have gone away. Now what more do I have? How can you say to me, what ails you?"
And the children of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry men fall upon you, and you lose your usual life with the lives of your household." Then the children of Dan went their way. And when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. So um they took the things Micah had made, and the priests who had belonged to him, and went to Laish. To a people quiet and secure, they struck them with the edges of sword and burned the city with fire. There was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon, and they had no ties with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. So they rebuilt the city and dwelt there. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, who was born to Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. Then the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the capacity of the land. So they set up for themselves Micah's carved image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Okay, so here's the thing. I always forget because we are sharing our Zoom account with all the church members, and we have a time limit of 4 minutes right now. So I will close this meeting and turn back on right away. I already changed the settings, so you can join in when we can have maybe 20 minutes of discussion with this session. Is that okay?
Mhm.
All right.
Sure.